Of course, with so much pressure riding on a video game release, it only makes it hurt more when the final product is a broken, bug-riddled mess. Sadly though, that's become all too common with AAA releases in the past several years. Terrible management and business practices have made the need for things like day one patches an all too common occurrence. I'm Si for WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 AAA video games that stayed broken. Number 10, Halo Master Chief Collection. One of the most anticipated PC releases of 2019 was Halo's Master Chief Collection. Finally, non-Xbox players could experience Microsoft's flagship franchise in one glorious package without having to shell out the money for another console. However, when the collection was released, PC players found the game riddled with bugs, network issues, and visual glitches. While setting aside the many bugs, the offline campaign was playable enough. Online multiplayer, the thing millions buy Halo games for, was damn near unplayable, with the amount of issues compounding it. Sadly, these issues have yet to be completely fixed. Even as late as 2022, 343 Industries released another patch to fix yet more visual bugs they failed to iron out before the original release now 4 years ago. The best thing about the Halo games on their original hardware is how they run smooth as butter, being some of the most tightly built AAA titles out there to this day. So the fact that Microsoft is still fixing this collection so long after launch is just abysmal. Number 9, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. This game lands near the bottom of this list, since across the last decade, Skyrim has been heavily patched to remove the worst of its bugs. However, it is still a Bethesda game, and Bethesda is actually Latin for broken. Okay, fine, my editor is telling me I can't tell you that because it's not technically a fact. But playing Skyrim now, you will rarely run across the sheer breadth of glitches that plagued the game on its original release. However, when they do show up, you'll know it. From texture glitches that plague every Bethesda game, to annoying audio bugs, to important quest items just not showing up. Even though the game is 12 years old at this point, it's still not perfect. Skyrim remains one of the most fun and popular RPGs ever made, but my word, is it still riddled with issues even now. Number 8, Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect Andromeda was a game rushed to release by a wing of BioWare formerly specialising as a support studio, and one that had worked on the multiplayer for Mass Effect 3. They were then forced to work with an engine fundamentally incompatible with the kind of game they were trying to make, thanks to EA, with at best half the team size that made the previous 3 titles. So frankly, we should count ourselves lucky that Andromeda didn't make PCs and consoles burst into flames. Instead though, Andromeda is just kind of boring from a story perspective and a hilarious mess from an engine perspective. The Frostbite engine was already a millstone around the neck of the dev team of Dragon Age Inquisition. That team had way more time, experience, and manpower than Andromeda ever did. This is thanks in large part to a team having to farm out several scenes to third-party devs just to get things done on time. Whilst not the easiest problem to fix, various post-launch patches did start to help. Shame then that the game was a critical and commercial flop, so additional work on top of what fans got years back was given up on entirely. Number 7, Batman Arkham Knight for PC. For the first 2 Arkham games, the ideal way to play was on PC. Boasting superior graphics and wickedly smooth frame rates, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City's PC ports were lauded from their launch. The same, sadly, cannot be said for the PC port of Arkham Knight, which was so riddled with game-breaking bugs and glitches that the whole thing had to be recalled by Rocksteady for heavy patching. Today it functions perfectly fine for the most part. Enough patches have been implemented that the worst of the glitches found in the game's initial release have been eliminated. However, while your average playthrough of Arkham Knight will be without any major bugs or glitches, the frame rate is only marginally better than what you'd get on a PlayStation 4. Compare this with previous entries which ran rings around their console counterparts, and it's a sad state of affairs. The fixes implemented by Rocksteady helped out a lot, but Arkham Knight's PC port still remains the black sheep out of the entire Arkham series. Number 6, Anthem. While Andromeda was riddled with graphical hiccups and wonky character model animations, that's nowhere close to BioWare's biggest blunder. That title goes to the embarrassment of a live service game known as Anthem. Anthem was the result of EA forcing BioWare to chase the siren song that is Destiny 2's success, resulting in a slapped-together mess of a game. While not the most broken live service title out there, Anthem was so antithetical to what BioWare fans wanted out of the company that they rejected it outright. So much so, the so-called roadmap BioWare had planned for the game was abandoned immediately due to the sheer enormity of the bomb. As a result, the bugs that were there at launch are still there today, and the game feels like it's missing entire valleys of content for obvious reasons. Anthem was an unmitigated disaster for the company, and with Anthem 2.0 now completely off the table, they won't be fixing what's wrong anytime soon. Number 5, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Generally speaking, when you get a game for a next generation console, you do so with the assumption that it will be the ideal way to play. But in the case of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, that ended up not being the case in the slightest. Bugs that were prevalent at launch, particularly particularly with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X versions of Jedi Survivor, were ironed out in the coming weeks and months as part of a series of patches. However, even with every new update, the company failed to do anything about the bad frame rate issues in the game's performance mode. The reason this was a problem, besides the obvious, is that Survivor's Souls-like combat doesn't allow for things like lag or gameplay stutters, so if you play on current consoles, you are expected to die a lot because the game suddenly decided to throw a hissy fit in the middle of a boss battle. It's only recently, with patch 7, over 4 months after release, that things have taken a turn for the better. For the game being such a hotly anticipated sequel, over 100 days waiting for a fidelity mode to function properly is unacceptable. Number 4, Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity was a notoriously buggy, unplayable mess when it first hit store shelves back in 2014. Fans rejected the game outright because of the sheer scope of the glitches that plagued it, on top of the money-grubbing microtransactions that Ubisoft stuffed in. While many of the bugs were fixed in the months that followed, they never found and fixed all of them. Players still complain today about weird textures, facial animations, though they're thankfully nowhere near as bad as the nightmare fuel that accompanied the original release, and of course the occasional crash. Considering this still remains the nadir of the Assassin's Creed franchise, it's unlikely that Ubisoft will demand these remaining issues be worked on. That horrible first impression of Unity has stuck, and in the developers' eyes, perhaps doing anything about it at this point is a waste of time. But hey, at least we don't have floating eyes and teeth anymore, so that's something. Number 3, Redfall. Like with Jedi Survivor, Redfall is pretty recent, so there's a chance it will be further patched to fix its myriad of issues. Still, considering that this isn't a global IP like Star Wars that demands investment, and that Redfall bombed and bombed hard at launch, well, we have our doubts. Redfall was a buggy, nigh unplayable mess when it came out, and even when holding together long enough to function, the game is so bland and committee designed that it shakes out as being not worth the effort. Nothing short of an embarrassment on the part of Arcane Studios, who typically have a much better pedigree than this. Redfall, despite the constant barrage of ads for it leading up to its release, was a critical and commercial flop, mostly thanks to how unfinished it was. And whilst the game has since been patched, its momentum got absolutely stopped dead. The team maintain that they're going to continue to work on Redfall until it's, quote, a good game, but considering the state it's in already, well, they might be there a while. Number 2, WWE 2K18. Yearly sports tie-in games have always had a reputation of being rough around the edges, almost as if making a development team churn out a game every single year is an awful idea. But WWE 2K18 was a special kind of disaster. Upon release, the game came bundled with a career mode riddled with bugs, some of which made the game totally unplayable, side quests that were somehow worse, and there were endless graphical glitches. Sweet, merciful God, the graphical glitches. While some of these problems were addressed with DLC and updates, once the next game came out, well, guess what? 2K just moved on. As a result, WWE 2K18 is still fundamentally broken from top to bottom. The WWE games, much like the media empire they're based on, is what happens when you have no real competition and thus no drive to improve yourself. Combine that with the hectic schedule of a yearly release and you get a recipe for one of the all-time great disasters in AAA gaming. And number 1, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. A game so broken on release that its first patch was the size of 2 entire games and it still didn't fix anything. The top of this list could only be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Meant to be a grand return for one of the PlayStation's most venerated franchises, as well as a last-ditch effort by Activision to hold on to the license, instead we got an unmitigated disaster on every possible level. Even with various massive updates that were added quickly after release, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 still controls terribly, with bugs tripping you up at every turn and controls that, rather than build on what the previous entries added to the gameplay, strip things back for the worst. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, despite the valiant efforts of Vicarious Visions providing excellent remakes of the first 2 games, was an immortal nail in the franchise's coffin. To this day it's been abandoned and forgotten about, never to see any further much needed polish from Activision. Talking about these disappointing disasters of games is filling me full of rage, and maybe you're the same, so let's carry that along. With this video on screen now, 10 video game franchises with one game everyone hates. Make sure you like this video, subscribe and leave a comment down below on other examples. You can head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.